The big takeaway from this is very interesting. You know, they are outlining several steps that many different bodies, whether it's Congress, bar associations within different states, or law enforcement agencies, the steps that they should take as a result of this comprehensive report from this committee. The biggest one that I'm seeing here is that this committee is recommending that there be steps taken to enforce the 14th Amendment, Section 3. This committee says, of course, that part of the Constitution says that anyone that incites an insurrection should be barred from holding any future office. So specifically, it says the committee believes that those who took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution on January 6th should be barred, disqualified and barred from holding government office. And if you read between the lines there, of course, they are pointing directly at the former President Trump, who has already announced his candidacy for 2024. So that's a big step from this committee, saying that, look, it's right there in the Constitution. If you incite an insurrection, you are barred from holding future office. Unclear if that would actually be implemented, but the committee is urging that. And one other important thing here, Laura, you know, they're talking about how law enforcement agencies, federal agencies, Secret Service really need to take a hard look at violent extremism, because of course that's part of what amplified and sort of fed into this mob movement that moved to the Capitol on January 6th, breached the Capitol, stormed inside, resulted in injuries, even a few deaths. So they're saying that law enforcement, other agencies need to take a big look at that. And then of course they're also saying, I'll end here, Laura, they're talking about the Electoral Count Act. And of course they want to codify that no vice president, no other official can ever overthrow the electoral count, the electors that have been chosen via individual states. Of course, that was something that the former president was pushing Vice President Mike Pence to do. It's something ultimately the vice president refused to do. But the committee here pointing out that the House of Representatives has passed what's called the Presidential Election Reform Act. They are now urging the Senate to pass that as well, so that it is codified that the vice president does not have any power in this process, which of course sort of was one of the initial points that the former president tried to seize on and urged the vice president to overturn the election. But a lot in here, Laura. Most of it, though, the narrative here, and really expounding upon everything they've shown in testimony, in the public testimony, putting it in black and white, and then in these appendices detailing the recommendations that they are making to many bodies about what can be done now.
I want to bring in former U.S. Attorney Harry Litman. Harry, I'm so glad that you're with us tonight. This is a very significant day. We've been waiting for this, not just since Wednesday, but really since, well, probably January 6th, and the committee was actually impaneled. I'm wondering, in terms of, you've seen the recommendations, there's about 11 of them that goes beyond that initial executive summary. It includes things like the Electoral Count Act. It includes accountability, a deeper dive into violent extremism. It includes the National Special Security Event and the protocol that you do to prevent this from happening. But one in particular that I'm really curious about your take as a former prosecutor is this 14th Amendment, Section 3. The one where, frankly, we recall from the second impeachment of the former President Donald Trump, a focus was on the disqualification of somebody from holding office now or in the future if they participated or helped to incite or give comfort and aid to insurrectionists, for example. Tell me about this particular section. What stands out to you about this recommendation?
The first thing that stands out is the committee is actually going for it. So Raskin made it clear in his remarks, so did the Vice Chair Cheney. It's a bit of a constitutional puzzle, Laura, and I've thought about this and studied it a lot, how exactly you effectuate this provision in the 14th Amendment that says once you have sworn an oath to the Constitution, then committed insurrection, you may not serve in the future. It has to be the case that it can be brought into effect. And yet, there's some law out there that suggests Congress has to vote it. There's some law that suggests just a judge or a jury could find it. I think the committee wasn't sure, but they really want to make this play, and you can see it as the kind of grand compromise to just dislodge Trump from the body politic. So the big thing is they're going for it, and remember that just this week, 40 Democrats in the House of Representatives have done a motion to try to effectuate just this. Raskin is clearly the author of it. He's the constitutional law professor. It must be able to be done, but how exactly is a mystery, and they want to get it right because the risk is you'd go through all the steps and the Supreme Court then bats it down. So that's something that really jumped out at me, jumped out even on Monday.
It's a really important point because the idea of the proof and the going for it, given the fact that, I mean, on the one hand, Harry, it's great news. There's not a whole lot of precedent on a case like this, right? You don't want there to be volumes about case law that actually talks about people who were aiding and abetting or giving aid and comfort or actually inciting insurrections against our government. But because of that, in this case law and common law system that we're in, where we look at former cases and we decide how to go forward based on the former holdings of the court, it is a difficult thing to address. But in their criminal referrals, you remember, there was language about the incitement statute they were trying to articulate. The language tracks, in some respects, the same outcome. Was that a way to try to nudge the DOJ to look into a statute that would do this very thing if it was politically unavailable to them through the impeachment?
I think 100%, although they also want to do it on their own. It's sparse precedent there, but the last time it was done, it was by vote of Congress. There's a 19th century precedent that says it has to be voted by Congress. They want to do it both ways. They want to do belt and suspenders, and there's all kinds of different reasons why it's tricky. A thing to remember, this is a qualification. There are only 3 or 4 in the Constitution. You have to be 35 years old, you can't be foreign born, and you may not have done this. Now, the Supreme Court has made it clear you can't add to those qualifications. But if you're doing that insurrection, that's what tracks the 14th Amendment. And it's a hard charge, Laura, as you know. It's got a checkered history. We have Trump saying, be peaceful. There's no real agreement here. They have to go by aiding and abetting. That's why, though, I believe it showed up in this final list of 4, it was the surprise entry of the 4. We're really going to see in subsequent weeks how this plays out.
I also want to address this because, you and I have had these conversations over the better part of 6 years at this point about the notion of subpoena power and what it takes as prosecutors. When you give somebody a subpoena, it's not like an invitation to a tea party you can sort of decline. You're supposed to show up. But then in recent years, the subpoenas that have been issued by Congress, they've had their noses have been thumbed at Congress for a variety of reasons. One of the recommendations in this very report deals with the House's Civil Subpoena Enforcement Authority. And they say the current authority on how to enforce their own subpoenas through civil litigation is unclear. This is a really interesting take because they probably anticipate the fact that there has been a precedent set about people no longer seeing the gravitas that ought to be attached to a congressional subpoena.
It's a great point, and really, it's the same. It's gotten common to say, well, you can ignore congressional subpoenas. The only reason is Congress's only last 2 years, and then once they expire, a subpoena expired. Well, Trump in particular, and before years ago, it was always either honored or negotiated, but they developed this strategy of just playing it out until Congress folded. So you're right. It is one of the big recommendations. There are 4 appendices at the end. You've dealt with almost all of them. There's also foreign corruption and the big lie of the graft, as it were, where Trump raised all this money and used it for bad purposes. But that's about half of what's big here. And the other half, there are little snippets that they didn't present to us. They did a very good job, did the committee, of really putting their best feet forward. But now there was a whole bunch that we didn't see because it wasn't in the front of the hearings, but that really does fill in the details. Roger Stone, for example, or the way the Proud Boys took Trump will be wild as a summons to come to D.C., the way he knew about the big lie. Those little shadings are done. Other than that, though, I think the 14th Amendment thing you just mentioned is huge, and the series of recommendations in the appendices.